Standing Order 81-4 and the motion adopted on Monday, April 15, 2024, the committee is resuming consideration of the main estimates 2024-2025, referred to the committee on Thursday, February 29th, 2024. With us today for the second hour are the same senior officials from the Department of Natural Resources. Michael Vandergrift, Deputy Minister, Isabel Chan, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Francis Bryson, Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer, Frank Desrosiers, Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy and Innovation, Glenn Hargrove, Assistant Deputy Minister, Canadian Forest Service, Ronaldo Genti, Assistant Deputy Minister, Kimberly Lavoie, Assistant Deputy Minister, Noko Wisik, Drew Leyburn, Assistant Deputy Minister, Aaron O'Brien, Assistant Deputy Minister, Fuels Sector, Debbie Scharf, Assistant Deputy Minister. My apologies if I mispronounced anybody's name. I would ask that you present yourself prior to answering any questions. I will now open the floor for the first round. It will be a 6-minute round that we will have, and we'll have one round only, and we'll be at the end of the meeting by then. So we'll start with 6 minutes with Mr. Patzer.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to everybody for being here. Just right off the bat, during COVID, there was 2 years we found in the Auditor General report that the department did next to nothing on the just transition. I'm just wondering whose decision was it to just kind of put a hold on that whole important issue of the just transition? Whose decision was that?
Mr. Chair, thank you first of all for the invitation to be here today. To answer the question, the department has taken steps with the Sustainable Jobs Initiative, both in terms of the legislation, which I know this committee has spent time considering, but also in terms of working with colleagues in Employment and Social Development Canada on training programs that are being rolled out as well to assist communities in the energy transition.
Okay, so I'm assuming you're referencing the retrofit program in the budget, but what I'm talking about was, during COVID and also the rest of the budget, there is actually no mention really of the just transition in there. So I'm talking very specific, narrowly focused programming for communities that are losing their sole economic driver. Towns like Coronach, towns like Rockglen, there's communities all across Alberta that's the same thing's going to happen. No mention of them whatsoever. So that's basically 4 years in a row that has been lost. Whose decision was it, especially during COVID, to do nothing on the file?
Mr. Chair, to answer the question, the department takes very seriously the concerns of communities as people work through this transition. There were programs related to the coal transition that were implemented in recent years, and we can provide further information to the committee around that. And as I mentioned, there was funding, I believe, when was it, a year and a half ago or so, for sustainable jobs and the Sustainable Jobs Training Fund, which we are now working with Employment and Social Development Canada to roll out, which will provide training opportunities as well to help people transition and also take advantage of the opportunities that exist also with the economic transition as well.
Okay, one more quick question here, and then I'll transfer my time to Mr. Falk. Minister Guilbeault, the Environment Minister, said that the government does not measure the annual amount of emissions that are directly reduced by carbon pricing. Now, the Minister of Natural Resources here just said that there was I don't have the exact number that he said, but somewhere about a third of carbon reductions will be directly attributed to the carbon tax. So, who's telling the truth?
Mr. Chair, I don't know if Debbie, if you have anything on the. I don't have anything more. So I'll have to come back to you on that, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to the officials for being here at committee, and I want to start off with the Deputy Minister. Could you tell the committee what percentage of new vehicle sales are zero emissions?
Mr. Chair, maybe I could ask Erin O'Brien, who's our ADM responsible, if she has that figure. Number? Okay, we don't have the latest figure. I know it varies by province. For sure.
Canada website here, and it says in 2021, 2.3% were battery electric vehicle sales, and in 2022 it rose to 3%. Electric Autonomy Canada, in a report produced by S&P Global, cited that zero emissions new car sales were at 11.7. That includes battery only and hybrid models, a combined 11.7% of new car sales in 2023. The minister here before told us that 1 in 5 vehicles sold were zero emissions in 2023. That's 20%. Those numbers are a huge discrepancy from what Stats Canada is reporting and what the industry is reporting. Do you think the minister is delusional or dishonest?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I believe that 1 in 5 figure is a figure from the International Energy Agency. That is a global number.
Well, that certainly isn't what the minister said here before. He certainly led this committee to believe that that was the numbers and the statistics from Canada here. That's 20% of new vehicle sales. It's not anywhere close to that. Stats Canada would put the target closer to 10%, as will the industry. So that number is very different from what the minister reported here. Shifting gears a little bit to the TMX pipeline. Originally, the project was bought for $4.5 billion with an anticipated construction cost of about $4.5 billion. So that total cost was $9 billion. That has ballooned now to $34 billion. Is there still a business case for the pipeline at $34 billion?
Mr. Chair, the Government of Canada does believe there's a business case for the pipeline in terms of the benefits to the country, the economic benefits that will ensue, the revenues that will ensue for governments, and the government is confident that it will be able to divest of the pipeline in a way that makes good economic sense for Canadians.
And has the minister confirmed to your department that Canada will recover its entire costs of the $34 billion for the pipeline?
Mr. Chair, this is something that the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance is leading in terms of the divestiture. And the government has indicated that it will divest of the pipeline at a time when it will make the best sense for Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Vandergrift. That's time's up. And we'll now go to our next round of questioning with Ms. Jones. Ms. Jones, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Oh, good. No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll go to Mr. Schiffke.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you very much,
We'll
Chair. And
update you.
let me start off by saying it's a pleasure to be here as my first meeting with this committee. I look forward to working with all members to advance the good work that this committee has embarked on. Mr. Chair, I'll be splitting my time with Mr. Jauhari. The question that I have for our witnesses today, department officials, is in relation to the government's plan to plant 2 billion trees. Something that is of great importance if we are to meet our greenhouse gas reduction targets, particularly with an emphasis on what had happened over the last year with the wildfires that we experienced and that were projected possibly to have this summer as well, and we hope that's not the case. What many Canadians perhaps don't realize is that the vast majority of the territory in this country is not controlled by the federal government. It's actually controlled by the provinces and the territories, Indigenous communities. And so there needs to be diligent work done to sign agreements with our partners to make sure that we can reach that target. What agreements have been signed with the provinces and territories with regards to tree planting, but also in our aim to meet our 2030 targets? Perhaps that's something for ECCC, but I'd love to know more for the Canadians that are watching. Fill them in on where we are and how those agreements are going to help us meet our goal.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. Perhaps I can start and then invite Glenn Hargrove, who runs the Canadian Forest Service, to add on. You are very right to point out the importance of the partnerships in delivering the 2 billion trees program. That's one of the benefits of the program and one of the challenges of the program is we need to work with partners in order to deliver the objectives. We have 9 agreements in principle in place now with provinces and territories. We are continuing to negotiate with the remaining provinces, and we expect we will have new territories, and we'll have those agreements in place shortly. As the minister indicated, we now have agreements in place or under negotiation to plant 553 million trees, so that is important progress. But there's more work to do, and it's an ongoing challenge that we are continuing to work with the partners. Perhaps I could invite Glenn to add and also speak about some of the other streams, because there's private streams, Indigenous streams, other partners we work with as well.
Thank you, Deputy. And yes, we're also moving forward on the urban stream of the program where funds are essentially fully committed. We've also worked with the National Indigenous organizations on co-developing a distinctions-based model for delivering the Indigenous stream. We also have a multitude of agreements under the private land stream. And the federal, the funding for federal partners is fully dispersed as well. So lots of progress on those as well. So we're actually over 200 agreements signed now under the program.
So over 200 agreements signed, 9 agreements with provinces and territories, 553 million trees through those agreements will be planted. I wanted to say thank you for your hard work in this. Particularly my community of Vaudreuil-Soulanges benefited from 10,000 of those trees. So I appreciate the effort made to benefit smaller communities and allow them to be a part of this very important work. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, MP Shefke, and it's good to be at this committee as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister, we'll be embarking on a study in this committee very shortly that will be looking at the state of electricity need in Canada, from generation to transition to transmission to distribution, consumption, and many other factors. One of the sources of the green electricity that we'll be looking at is the nuclear energy, and Canada has been in the forefront of that industry for a very long time through CANDUs. And I had the opportunity to visit Darlington last year in the summer, and they were giving us an update on the SMR, the 3 SMR module that the reactors that they're about to implement. Can you give us an update of where we are on the SMR side, as well as the great work that I believe Canadian talent is doing across the world through the CANDU?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that important question. We do believe that small modular reactors are an important part of meeting Canada's future energy needs. And in fact, we are leading the world in many respects with the project at Darlington, with moving forward on an SMR. We have funding has been provided to help that project through the Canada Infrastructure Bank. The investment tax credits will also assist nuclear projects. But it goes beyond the Darlington project. There are important conversations taking place with other provinces about their interest in advancing SMRs, with Saskatchewan, where the government of Canada has provided funding for pre-development work, with New Brunswick, where we've also provided some pre-development funding on SMR project. And Alberta is also very interested in advancing SMRs now, and we're seeing partnerships between those provinces on how to advance SMRs in the country as well. So we do see potential for SMRs to start to roll out across the country and become an important part of the energy mix.
I also had an opportunity to talk to Minister of International Trade from Singapore, and one specific question that he asked is, where are you guys with the SMR in Darlington? So it's not only Canada and the provinces are looking for it, also there's a lot of international countries are very eagerly and closely watching what we're doing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We'll now go to Monsieur Simard for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. You know, in the Greener Homes Initiative, there have been lots of problems in Quebec, lots of failures. The administration of the program was handed over to a firm in Vancouver and Tel Aviv. Was there a bidding process for that? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me call on Mr. Leber to see if he has an answer for that question. Let me go on while waiting. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. There was a bid between the spring of 2021 till the end of 2023. Having looked closely at the situation, there were 48,000 files that were sent from Quebec. Only 23% of the 48,000 received answers. And there were many complaints because people were receiving answers only in English for Francophones, and this is totally unacceptable. And the deadlines were very long in Quebec. Did you introduce measures to resolve that situation?
Oui, nous avons travaillé.
Thank you, Chair. We worked in close collaboration with our partners in Quebec to respond to the complaints and to improve the program. I think that towards the end of the program, there were lots of improvements made in delivery of the program in Quebec. Question, to be clear, the problem was not from those sending requests. The problem was because people were not receiving answers from IntelliFi, at least no responses within acceptable deadlines and responses in French. Now, out of the 2 billion trees are not planted anywhere, anyhow. It needs some expertise. Did you consult specialists to come up with a strategy? If yes, could you submit to the committee the list of experts that were consulted? Answer. Thank you, Chair. It's a very good question. Thank you. Yeah, we could submit a list of specialists that were consulted when we were in the process of preparing the program. Also, when we reviewed proposals for the program, we received the responses to calls for the project. There are specialists who had to evaluate the proposals for projects. Question, have you looked into the possibility of finding out whether it's possible to plant trees that can be harvested? Answer, I do not quite understand. Out of the 2 billion trees, why are foresters not interested? It's because the trees that are being planted cannot be harvested. Did you look into that possibility that it could help the forest industry, those trees? Answer, we are now discussing that topic now with the province of Quebec. We are close to an agreement, and I believe that will take care of that issue as well. Question, I see $8.5 million of grants for new programs to fight against wildfires. That's very small, 8.5 million in my opinion. Did you think about supporting forest entrepreneurs who are the ones who are primarily affected when there are wildfires? They cannot go to the forest. They have operating costs that are very high, and they are a pillar when it comes to the forestry sector, and they have been compromised for years now. Are you thinking about a program to allow those people to have access to liquidity? Answer. Mr. Chair, maybe I should ask my colleague to answer the question. Glenn. Answer. Thank you for the question.
Actually, first of all, just to the first part of your question, we actually, the government's invested around $800 million in recent years on wildfire supports. We've also renewed our forest sector programming, so $368.4 million over 3 years, and so that's intended to support the long-term sustainability of the forest sector across Canada. So things like pre-commercial research, things like adopting transformative technologies and products, green construction with wood efforts, forest leadership internationally, encouraging and supporting Indigenous participation in the forest sector. So quite a range of supports for the forest sector as well, in addition to the programming that's supporting wildfire resilience and response.
Petite question rapide.
Quick question. A while ago, when responding to my colleague, you said the intention of the government was to sell pipelines. We were also told that on Trans Mountain, the profits that will be produced will be reinvested in clean energy. And the PBO said that there was no profit that could be expected, in his opinion. So are there any plans to invest profits that do not exist when we're talking about clean energy?
C'est le plan, mais c'est plutôt...
Answer, that's the plan. But that file is handled by the Department of Finance. So maybe we could come back with more information. Thank you.
We'll now go to Mr. Angus for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been massive investments or promised investments in EV sector. Stellantis, that's about $11 billion. The Honda, $15 billion. GM, Northvolt, Ford, Volkswagen, and we're going head to head with our competitors right across the border who are determined that the EV industry is going to stay in the States. But that's all dependent on access to critical minerals. Now, we've heard a lot of talk around this table about how long it takes to get a mine past the regulatory process, and it's about 10 years. Right now in Treaty 9, where I represent, which is pretty much the metals basket of North America, there's a $95 billion lawsuit against the federal government and the province over failure to consult. So does the government have a plan for where they're going to get critical minerals so that we can actually get our these plants up in operation?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. It's such an important issue for the country. We are really focused on implementing the critical minerals strategy. As the minister mentioned earlier, the Critical Minerals Infrastructure Fund, for example, we are just finished a first round of project applications. We're looking to make decisions on those very shortly. And the goal of that is really to find ways to open up new areas for mining, so that enabled through either electricity, transmission lines, or roads, or other types of infrastructure that allows for that mining to take place. We're also seeing a lot of interest in the sector just over the past year in terms of new types of offtake agreements being signed with developing mines in Canada. So we're starting to see that offtakes with auto companies, offtakes with technology companies, different types of agreements being put in place now, which we think will help to continue to stimulate the industry moving forward. And lastly, I would say in the budget, there was a plan put forward around regulatory efficiency, which includes looking and coordinating our permitting processes, but also consultations with Indigenous peoples is very, very important. The Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program is part of that. Having a Crown Consultation Coordinator is part of that. There's important steps that we can take on our consultation processes as well.
I ask because, when I was first elected, Ring of Fire was going to be the next big thing. And people I've talked to in the industry, it's like, let's move on and talk about other things because the consultations weren't done right. We have to deal with roads. We have to deal with the really fragile ecosystem that's there. So there are serious problems about moving into areas that have not had mining, but we have areas that have mining. And so, for example, you take the Sudbury Nickel Basin. Right now, pretty much all of Sudbury Valley's nickel sulfate is probably just going to end up being hoovered up by the GM operation. There's not going to be a lot of excess unless we kick into production ore bodies that are there. But that will require serious investment for shaft sinking, tunneling, and God help that I'm saying that we should give a break to companies that's normally what they do, but they can easily go to Malaysia, and there are no standards in Malaysia. So my question is has the government looked at using the tax credit system, maybe even for a 3 or 4 year period, to companies that could actually get ore bodies into production now that wouldn't have to go through the creation of electrification, that would have to go through all the environmental assessments because they are in Thompson, Manitoba. They could open up an ore body and run for 40 years without having to go through all the red tape. Sudbury can do it. Timmins can do it. Have you looked at actually making an agreement with mining companies to say, if you commit to getting these ore bodies that you know are there into production, we will give tax credits for the construction work on the tunneling and shaft sinking.
Mr. Chair, that's an important issue that you are raising, and it is something that issue has been raised with us, and it is something that we are certainly looking at. I think you are right in that there's tremendous potential in existing mines and existing mining areas. In fact, we're seeing a lot of the really interesting projects being developed around in the Sudbury Basin in Quebec, where there's existing mines, et cetera. So there's a lot of potential there. I would say another piece of the puzzle is around the question of the global pricing of a lot of these products, and how can we establish and ensure a market that reflects the ESG standards that we all want to see in these products, because we're seeing that in the nickel market right now is a big issue, and we need to address that part of it with international partners.
Absolutely. I mean, our competitor, and this is not the United States, they're trying to get our metals. Our competitors are countries like Malaysia, Democratic Republic of Congo, places that have no proper standards, and they can easily bring mines into production because they don't have to meet any standards at all. In our region, Crawford Nickel is 12 kilometers outside of Timmins, and it's right beside a smelter. We invest in that, and we know that it'll have First Nation support. We know that it'll meet environmental standards. So I guess the question is, if we're talking about the urgency of this, are we looking to kickstart development here so that we can compete, especially if Malaysia floods the market and nickel prices drop?
Mr. Chair, if I could just say yes, yes, we are. And Crawford, in fact, is an example of one of those mines that's developing very interesting offtake agreements right now because of that potential. And we do need to work with our allies and like-minded countries around the market and the pricing of these products to reflect the ESG, the proper ESG requirements, and to encourage that diversity of supply that's needed.
Thank you. That was one round of questioning, and I want to thank all officials for joining us today and providing your testimony to committee. Colleagues, and so you can finish up and leave. And for colleagues, I would just ask you to hold for a minute before all of us exit. I just wanted to, because today's conversation was on main estimates, do I have unanimous consent to vote on the main estimates in one motion? Okay, so I'm just going to go through this quick, and then shall vote 1 under Atomic Energy of Canada Limited, vote 1 under Canadian Energy Regulator, vote 1 under Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, vote 1, 5, and 10 under Department of Natural Resources, vote 1 under Northern Pipeline Agency, less the amounts voted in the interim supply. Carry.
Yes.
On division. Please call the roll. Oh.
For our division, we just
on division. Yeah. Okay, on division. Oh, and shall I report the votes less the amounts voted in interim supply to the House? Yes? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending today and doing a great job working together and asking lots of great questions. Have a great rest of your Mondays. Meeting adjourned.